There's an old saying that says, you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you come from. And I mean it just like that, come from. So I have with me today a great friend of mine, because one of the purposes of a call to action is to disseminate, innovate information about the community and motivate folk on the basis of that information. And so I would be remiss if I didn't get somebody, and then we just finished a discussion and Herbert asked us what we were going to talk about. And I said, we're going to have a fireside chat. And what I mean by that is we're going to talk about a lot of things, because he has a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, a lot of feelings, a lot of capabilities, a lot of history, and I can go on and on. So I'm happy to have my guest today. This is a call to action.
A call to action.
I'm your host, Alex Habersham, and the person that all of those adjectives was describing is none other than Mr. Charles Richardson, who has held several positions in this community and who's you're very, very, very familiar with him. But the thing I want to say hastily is that he has had the backbone, if you please, to address issues in our community that sometimes were controversial and sometimes people didn't like them, and he continues to do that. But he does it in the right way and lets the community know that those are his feelings, but he brings excellent points and documentation to the feelings that he has and the information that he presents. So I'm more than a little happy today to have him to just kind of discuss things. One thing, since we got Dr. King's birthday coming up and we've got Black History Month coming up next month, I just want to talk about the state of the African American community, both nationally but particularly locally, and the kind of things. And I'm using this long introduction because I'm winding him up and I'm giving him directions, but I want him to talk about where he sees the community, particularly Central Georgia, educationally, economically, socially, and civically. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I present to you Mr. Charles Richardson, who's going to begin with a little biographical information about himself.
Boy, if you don't know me by now, is that a song? Been around in this community. It's home. Has been for the last 37 years. People have followed my writings in the Telegraph and other publications, including the Black Pages. You pretty much know me and know what I'm thinking about. One of my primary areas of focus has always been education, and will continue to be so. Because I believe, as Keith Moffett used to say, the answer to every problem is education. And that is it, education. So why don't we start with that? Where are we in the state of education? I believe we are in a place now that is very dangerous. We have the Bibb County school system has the highest poverty rate of any school system in the country. Now, I didn't stutter. The highest poverty rate of any school system in the country. That doesn't come from my statistics. That comes from the Bibb County School District statistics. So what does that mean? It means that you have to pour more resources into that population in order to get the results that you need for this community to move forward. I'm not sure we are willing to do that. We haven't been in the past. I'm not sure this community is willing to pony up, because that costs money. It costs money in teacher training. It costs money in administrator training. It costs money in our university system, because teachers have to be trained to deal with that population. I know at Middle Georgia State University, we're doing just that. We are training our teachers that can walk into that population and understand that I've got to know my who. In other words, whoever walks into my room, I got to know their living conditions. I got to know their mom and them. I got to know if they're staying with their grandparents. I got to know who's sick in the family. I got to keep up with that child, because when that child walks into that schoolroom, that child belongs to that teacher. And just like a parent, you got to know what goes on with your children. Our teachers have to be able to do that. And being quite frank, Some teachers are not prepared to do that. Some teachers don't want to do that. We have to make sure that our classrooms are staffed with teachers that understand the population that they're serving.
Okay. Now, what other, you talked about the teachers, what other kind of factors you think can contribute to the, that's a shameful statistic.
Well, the teachers can't do anything about the poverty.
No, I know that, but I'm asking you about the poverty. I'm asking you about the poverty because we can address it in the school system because it already exists. What can we do to try to lessen the degree of poverty that we have in our community?
It all comes down to a 4-letter word, JOBS. Jobs that are paying a living wage where people can support their families and afford to support their children. And those parents, whether you are in that position or not, have to not leave it up to the teacher and the schools to do everything. You have to be at that school. When that teacher calls, you're supposed to answer. You're supposed to run to the school when things are good. Not just, when things are good. Not just when little Johnny or little Jane is messing up. When things are good. That is so essential because the teacher needs to know that that parent is supporting that child. And that teacher is there to help that child in whichever way he or she can. But that teacher needs help. When that kid goes home, they've got to know that there's going to be a parent there that, even if they don't know the study material, sits down with them and observes what they're doing.
Right.
So that the teacher and the parent are on the same page. And again, support the school, support the PTAs and the parent-teacher associations, all of that stuff. And be there for your child.
Yeah.
Because the parent is the number one example.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's go to Dr. King. Talk a little bit about your feelings about his initiatives, about him, and about where we are today as it relates to his goal of trying to put us in a certain position.
Well, Dr. King was a transformative figure that, you're a transformative figure, or we know of him as being transformative when we're still talking about him way down the years.
Yeah.
But there's a few dates to remember. And one, his holiday was first proposed in 78. It wasn't signed by Ronald Reagan until 83. Didn't go into effect until 86. Those dates are interesting because for a while there, we had a couple of senators in North Carolina that stopped all the legislation. They didn't think King was worth it. And one of those senators was Jesse Helms. And his other Senate partner, whose name goes out of my head. No, not Strong.
Yeah.
He's South Carolina.
Oh, you said North Carolina.
North Carolina.
Okay.
But how long it took this country to recognize the impact that Dr. King had. Because truth be known, if King had not continued the movement that was really already in progress, there could have been a lot of bloodshed. I mean, there was a lot of bloodshed on our part, but there were some young folks, Stokely Carmichael and those folks, that were saying, forget this nonviolent stuff. Let's just start taking some people out.
Yeah.
And the impact of King and his philosophy of nonviolence prevented a lot of bloodshed and prevented maybe even another civil war. And we still talk about him today in reverence because he literally sacrificed his life for this country. And it's a good thing that we are honoring him as the mighty figure that he was.
As a part of that honoring, what obligations do we have in this decade? We're coming into a new decade, and although he's done what he can do and he's dead and we memorializing him, but life goes on.
Right.
And then, and we ought to be trying to influence life in a manner that's going to be better in all of those areas that I mentioned. What can we do now?
Well, first thing, while King's efforts in civil rights and public accommodations is all thought of, his first act was economic boycott. We're giving folks our bus money, and we're getting thrown in the back of the bus. So we still have that economic power. And as I've written in the Black Pages, the dollar circulates in our community one time and it's gone. Gone to build somebody else's house, gone to build somebody else's business, gone to put somebody else's kid in school, all gone. While in the white community, it circulates about 8 times, sometimes as many as 12 times. So we have to think, and something that came up in a place I don't go to often, Facebook, why don't we have certain businesses here, there, whatever? Well, because we don't support our own. So if we did just one thing in supporting our own black businesses that are all over the place, all they have to do is pick up a issue of Black Pages or go on your website and they can see that. Let our dollar speak for us. We have tremendous buying power, but we don't have a plant that produces toilet tissue.
Wow.
So if that's just one thing.
Yeah, and then that's something we can do voluntarily. We don't have to ask anybody.
Nope.
Without being told things of that nature. Okay, so let me ask you something, Dr. Richardson. Along with the education and what have you, and without any endorsements or things of that nature, but let's talk about the power of the vote and the power of influencing and selecting individuals who are going to look after the well-being of everybody generally, but the African American community in particular.
Well, the vote, by all of the evidence that we have, even going back to the prior election, is the most powerful thing that we have as a country. One person, one vote. If we use our vote to not only, before we vote, question those who we're voting for, making sure that that person understands who they are responsible to, their constituents, and exercise that vote, there's nothing that can't be accomplished, particularly in Macon, Georgia. Some quick statistics. The African American registered voter population is between 53 and 54% in Bibb County. The white voting registered population is between 47 and 48%. That's simple math. You used to be a teacher. And still are. That means that for the county-wide offices in this area, if African Americans wanted to control this area, they could. Why is that important? Because our interests, hopefully, would be secure in that. Now, that scares the white community half to death, and it really shouldn't. If we were that type of people to be vengeful, a lot of people would have died a long time ago. We are the most forgiving people, I think, on this planet from everything that's happened to us in this country. So if we control our vote, we can control our destiny. And once that happens, we have to be willing to vote out those that don't represent us. I think that, during King's time, the marches worked, his resistance worked, his nonviolence worked. But this is 2020. Methods have to change. It's not enough to register to vote. You got to go down and get up out of your seat and go down and vote. There is not a reason on this earth that we shouldn't have an African American governor in Atlanta. 55,000 votes. Quick calculation. If the counties of Fulton and DeKalb, if the black male population had just voted at 55%, just those two counties.
Come on.
Just those two counties. If we just voted at 50%, Stacey Abrams would be governor. And of course, the shirt tails would have fallen down to the Secretary of State, the Lieutenant Governor, all of that stuff. That's how close that election was. Now, Kemp. He says there was no voter suppression. Well, you're sitting as the Secretary of State. You're controlling from the statewide standpoint. You had something to do with it because you purged some of the rolls. But quite frankly, no matter purging the rolls, doesn't matter. In just those 2 counties, I won't go into the other counties because in black male voting in all of 159 counties only exceeded 50% in 3.
Was Bill one of them?
Bill was not.
Wow.
So
That says something to us, doesn't it, in
Right.
Bill County?
right, we got it.
Yeah.
While everybody's applauding that the voting percentage was up, but again, we're talking about numbers at 55,000 votes in just those 2 counties, just black males. I'm not even talking about black females, but in just black males. If they had voted at 50%, Stacey Abrams would be governor.
Yeah. Well, talk a little bit about the responsibility of, because I think it's important that, in casting a vote, we need to be intelligent. We need to make sure that we are voting for somebody, who's got everybody's interest at heart,
Correct.
particularly ours. I think sometimes, we make the mistake of not really examining. We want somebody, that's going to look after our interests, that's going to be able to move the community forward, and that's going to, because let me tell you something, and I'm not being political here, but Macon does not begin to be where she needs to be, economically, socially, educationally. But we got the resources. I mean, we just laying right there on the brink. Talk about, what we need to do to move the community forward and make it better for.
I'll point to some of the work that you're doing. You're an entrepreneur. You're making sure that other African Americans are employed. You found a niche. You're going for it. We have to let people know that they can find a niche and go for it. We have to have people in positions that can say, okay, we've got this contract. Let's put it out for bid. But let's make sure that we know who we're putting it out to bid to. And we also have to put pressure on those entities, whether it be the school board, whether it be the county, whether it be Macon Housing Authority. All of these places that are spending a lot of money, that the black community gets their share. I would say, without quibbling a dollar here, a dollar there, in the last 10 years, the school system has spent over $1 billion. None of those contracts, except one recently, went to black contractors.
Yeah, for
Appling and for Northeast.
I meant Northeast.
Yeah.
I meant Northeast.
So what does that mean? It means that somebody in our community is being able to hire people, being able to grow their business. I mean, $1 billion is $1 billion. It's a lot of money.
Support the community.
Right. So we have to demand of those entities that they do that. Macon Housing Authority has an excellent record of using minority contractors.
I know.
But we have to keep that pressure on, because soon people fall into some old patterns that, well, I know Joe down the block, or he did this job over here, he did that job over there. Well, if it's supposedly a bidding process, well, let's make sure that our folks are prepared, that our contractors know how to do that kind of stuff, and then say, here's a list. Go for it.
Yeah, and that's why voting is important.
Yes.
Because oftentimes politicians appoint people to these boards. Sometimes it's elected officials who appoint people to the board, the council, the commissioners, and things of that nature. So it's important.
And you look at why has our community gotten to this state of poverty? 2 reasons. One, the opportunities weren't there for many people, still aren't for many people. The other is that, I would imagine you got some people that haven't driven down past Forsyth from Pierce Avenue further down Pioneer. The community isn't there, unseen. Don't hear from them. All they hear about is when there's a killing off Napier or such like that. Our community has to get out of this mindset of generational poverty. And I'll give you an example. There's a community of Latinos. Most folk don't know who they are, or where they are, off 247. You know where they are. Their situation of poverty is, okay, I'm living with 4 families now. Next year, I'm gonna be living with 2 families. Year after that, I'm gonna have my own house. Year after that, I'm gonna have my own business. Year after that, I'm gonna do this. We have too many people in our community, African Americans, who say, I'm poor, I'm gonna be poor, I'm gonna stay poor, and I'm just gonna deal with it.
And that doesn't have to be.
Doesn't have to be.
Doesn't have to be at all. Because I want to hasten to say that there are probably resources, for people without jobs. We got jobs in Macon, and equally as important is the fact, so if you're without a job, there are entities, there are training programs, there are agencies, there are organizations, there are colleges and universities, and that's one of the things that I'm concerned about, is that irrespective of the situation that I'm in, I need to try to find a way. I need to exercise all the resources I have to do something for myself.
Right.
You don't need to have that. There's an old gospel song that says, I've been down so long to getting up don't cross my mind. We don't need to do that, because you don't have to be down, and there are resources available out there for us to do better as a community. Okay, we got talk a little bit about, your experiences with Black History Month and Black History activities, and you smile. And I know you wrote a lot of articles, and you were a part of the daily newspaper, the Macon Telegraph. Just kind of reflect on that. Go as far back and come as close up as you would like to.
Well, it's I have mixed emotions about Black History Month. One of those emotions is, don't just call me to speak to your class at school in February. It almost insults me. Now, so I have cut back on what I do in February. I say you can call me any other month,
but not February.
Now I still do some things.
I know
in February, but I just want them to know that Black history. You look at the students in your class, and in any class in Bibb County, 85 to 90% of that class is going to be African American or minority. Any classroom. So these children have to understand where they come from. They have to understand the accomplishments of their people so that they can feel some pride and say, if they did it, I can do it. Can you imagine? We've got the Tubman African American Museum here. We have a little bitty woman in the heart of slavery, the Civil War, and she accomplished what she accomplished. Now we've got the internet. We don't have to run through the woods. We don't have to do any of the things that she had to go through, and we can use that as an example to our children of why you can do anything. Your mother told you, my mother told me, that nothing could hold us back. That we had to be 10 times better than the next person in order to succeed. We have to start giving that message to our children, because those odds haven't changed. But yet still, we are succeeding. We just have to do it in greater numbers.
And the opportunities are there.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I just want to publicly thank you, man, for everything that you've done for the community, your involvement, your knowledge, and your writing ability, and your speaking during the other months, not February, for our community. And I also want to applaud your interest in education. I too am a student of education and a teacher, really, like you said. I taught school, and I understand the importance. And in closing, I just want to say, I'm going to start with an expression I used before that says, if it is to be, it's up to me. And I think that we all should repeat that to ourselves, particularly in acknowledging Dr. King and in memorializing and remembering Black History Month. Although all those statistics and all the information that we're submitting to you is true, you still can do something. You can do something about a job. You can do something about the ballot by going to vote and being intelligent in the decisions you make, and make sure that you do your research. And you can do something about the books, because with $3.5 billion of consumerism, then we can uplift our community by being conscientious shoppers. You got a closing statement.
Whenever I'm about to make a big purchase, even smaller purchases, the thing I go to is the Black Pages.
They're gonna think I told you.
No, you didn't. You couldn't pay me to say that. But I go to the Black Pages because I want my dollars to have a conscience. It's up to, like you say, it's up to me if it's to be. I said it backwards, but it means the same thing.
Yeah.
If they do just that, and trust the people that are in your book, because we have a tremendous distrust of our own. You know, somebody of another nationality can scream at us and shout at us and give us bad service, and we'll be back in there the next day. But one of our own do it, we spread that bad news everywhere.
Yeah.
So we have to learn how to trust our own. And if they just do the three things that you're talking about, the book, the ballot, and the job, things will get better. It ain't gonna happen overnight. But by and by,
It'll improve day by day.
day by day.
Yeah. This is a call to action.
A call to action.
I'm your host, Alex Habersham, having interviewed Mr. Charles Richardson, a mainstay in this community who has been very, very effective in doing all he can to make this a better community through dissemination of information and involved in all of those elements that we talked about. I want you to remember, if it is to be, it's up to me. And you should say that to yourself, and we all should say it and try to live by and practice it. Have a great day.
Our story begins more than 60 years ago inside an abandoned chicken coop where our founder discovered a retired teacher living, no home, no health care. So she said no to this injustice and yes to transforming lives. It's this drive, this compassion that inspired AARP. Today, we empower people to choose how they live as they age. We advocate for health and financial security. We strengthen communities everywhere. We are AARP Georgia, creating real possibilities.